My name is Elena Marquez. I was born on March 14, 1983 in Oaxaca, Mexico, and I am an ex-witch who once carried out night assignments against believers who prayed before sleeping. I am not sharing a rumor, not a sermon, not something I heard in church. This is what I personally did in the spirit realm and what I now deeply regret. We were trained to wait for nightfall because that is when most believers become spiritually careless. But there were four simple words some people whispered before: sleep, and the moment they spoke them, every spirit assigned to that house scattered in terror. Listen carefully. If you ignore what I am about to expose, you may remain spiritually vulnerable tonight. But if you understand it, your home will become a place darkness cannot enter. So like this video right now, comment and share it with someone you love. Because what you are about to hear exposes secrets the occult never wanted believers to know. And you must watch until the very end, because the final revelation will show you exactly why those four bedtime words make demons flee instantly. The first time I witnessed demons flee from a believer's house, it was not during a church service. It was at night. That was when we worked the most. Night assignments were the most effective operations in the occult world. That is what we were taught. When people are tired, when their minds are heavy, when their guard is lowered, that is when spiritual attacks succeed the fastest. We were trained to move between midnight and 3:00 a.m. That window was known among us as the quiet hour of human weakness. Families asleep, lights off, minds vulnerable. And during those hours, we carried out spiritual missions against believers. Yes, believers, because in the occult world, we were taught something that might shock you. Unbelievers were already spiritually unprotected, but believers were the real targets: people who prayed, people who worshipped, people who read scripture. Those were the homes that required special attention from the kingdom of darkness. So one night I was given an assignment: a house, a simple house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing special on the outside, but the instructions were clear: break the protection over that family. The mission was simple: release spiritual oppression into the home while the family slept. Fear, nightmares, confusion, marital division. Those were the typical results. That is how darkness slowly enters homes, not suddenly, quietly, night after night. And most believers never realize where the pressure begins. So that night we prepared the ritual. Three of us were involved, not physically inside the house, but spiritually targeting it. This was common in occult practices: assignments through spiritual projection and invocation. And when the ritual began, something unexpected happened. At first, everything was normal. The spiritual atmosphere around the house started weakening. You could feel the environment shifting. That is usually the first sign that a home has little spiritual defense. But then suddenly, something changed. Inside the house, one person moved. It was the father. He had just gone to bed. The lights were already off. But before he slept, he whispered something. Just four simple words: quiet, calm, almost like a habit. But the moment those words were spoken, everything in the spiritual realm shifted violently. The spirits we had invoked reacted instantly, not slowly, not gradually, instantly. They pulled back, they scattered. The atmosphere around the house became impossible to penetrate. And I remember feeling something I had rarely felt during assignments: fear. Because the moment those four words were spoken, a spiritual authority appeared around the house. It was not visible to human eyes, but in the spirit realm it was undeniable. A covering, a barrier, a wall of light. You must understand something. Demons do not fear buildings. They do not fear crosses on walls. They do not fear religious decorations, but they fear spiritual authority spoken with faith. Those four words were not long, not complicated, not ritualistic, but they carried recognition of divine authority. And the moment they were spoken, every dark presence we had summoned was forced back. The ritual collapsed. The assignment failed. The spirits refused to go near the house. And what shocked me most was this: the man who spoke those words had no idea what he had just done. He simply said them as he laid down to sleep, like a routine, like something his parents taught him. But in the spirit realm, it was a declaration, a signal, a spiritual command. You see, most believers think prayer only works during church, during worship, during long moments of devotion. But what we discovered in the occult world was something completely different. Sometimes the shortest prayer spoken with faith carries the greatest authority. And nighttime prayers were the most dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. Why? Because night is when darkness tries to operate. But when believers invite divine authority before sleep, the entire spiritual environment changes. It becomes guarded territory. That house that night became unreachable, completely unreachable. We attempted the assignment again 2 nights later. Same house, same ritual, same timing, but the same thing happened again. Right before sleep, the man whispered those same 4 words. And again, every spirit fled, assignments cancelled, rituals useless, and the spiritual barrier returned instantly. That is when our supervisor told us something that changed how I saw spiritual warfare forever. He said, "Never waste time on believers who speak those words before sleep." Those houses were considered spiritually fortified, protected, difficult targets. We were trained to look for homes where people did not pray at night, homes where people slept without acknowledging God, homes where fear was stronger than faith, because those were the houses where spiritual oppression could enter easily. And that realization began to disturb me, because it exposed something believers rarely understand. Nighttime is not just rest. Nighttime is spiritual transition. When you sleep, your mind rests, your body rests, but the spiritual atmosphere around your home remains active. And the last words you speak before sleep carry enormous authority. Those words can either leave your home exposed or they can seal it under divine protection. Eyenu. That night, 4 simple words shut down an entire occult assignment. But what shocked me even more was what I discovered later. Those 4 words were not random. They were something believers have spoken for generations, but many stopped saying them. And the moment believers stopped speaking them, darkness found easier access into homes. But when they are spoken again, something ancient activates, something powerful, something the kingdom of darkness recognizes immediately. And that is exactly what I will reveal in the next point. Because the truth about why those 4 bedtime words terrify demons is far deeper than most believers realize. You must understand something that shocked me when I was still inside the occult world. Darkness does not only watch what believers do during the day, it listens to what they say before they sleep. Yes, your last words before sleep carry a spiritual signal. In the occult realm, we were trained to observe homes spiritually before launching any assignment. Not every house was attacked the same way. Some homes were considered easy targets. Others were marked dangerous. The difference was not wealth, not education, not even church attendance. The difference was spiritual awareness inside the home at night. Many believers pray during the day, but night is when most people become careless. They scroll on their phones. They fall asleep to television noise. They close their eyes with anxiety, stress, fear, or anger still sitting in their hearts. And those emotional states create open doors. Darkness thrives on unresolved fear. It thrives on spoken negativity. It thrives when believers end the day spiritually unguarded. But there were certain homes we were trained to avoid, not because of pastors, not because of church leaders, but because of ordinary believers who spoke authority before sleep. When those believers whispered those 4 bedtime words, something happened instantly in the spirit realm. The atmosphere changed. Territory shifted. You see, demons do not just move randomly. They move through legal permission. That was one of the first things we were taught during occult training. Spiritual darkness searches for open doors. Words, fear, unforgiveness, bitterness, those things function like invitations. But when a believer ends the day by acknowledging divine authority, the opposite happens. Permission is revoked, access is denied, and that is exactly what those 4 words do. They revoke spiritual permission immediately. The moment they are spoken with faith, the environment around the believer changes. In the occult world, we could feel it, not metaphorically, literally. It felt like a territory being sealed, like a gate closing. And once that gate closed, spirits assigned to that house could not enter. There were nights when we would approach certain houses and stop before the ritual even began, because we could feel spiritual resistance already present. That resistance almost always meant the same thing. Someone inside the house had already spoken authority before sleeping. And demons hate that moment. They hate it because it ruins their timing. Remember something important. Night attacks rely on spiritual vulnerability. When believers sleep without spiritual protection, Their dreams become easier to manipulate. Fear enters through dreams. Oppression enters through dreams. Confusion enters through dreams. Many believers wake up feeling heavy, discouraged, anxious, and they never understand why. But the occult world understands this strategy very well. That is why night operations are so common in dark spiritual practices. But when believers declare authority before sleep, dream territory becomes guarded. That is why the moment those four words are spoken, darkness reacts violently, because the opportunity disappears. I remember another assignment that revealed this even more clearly. It was a small apartment. A young woman lived there alone. She was a believer, but she was also tired, working long hours, carrying stress. Those are the conditions darkness loves. We were instructed to create spiritual pressure in her life. Nothing dramatic, just gradual influence. Fear, isolation, discouragement, those are the slow weapons of darkness. So we observed the apartment spiritually for several nights. The first 2 nights, nothing happened. She fell asleep without praying. The atmosphere around the apartment remained open. The assignment was progressing easily. But on the third night, something changed. She received a phone call from her mother. We could not hear the words clearly, but we sensed a conversation about prayer. And that night, for the first time, she spoke those 4 bedtime words, quietly, softly, almost like she was remembering something she used to do as a child. And the moment she said them, the atmosphere around the apartment transformed instantly. The spirits assigned to that mission reacted the same way they had reacted at the house I told you about earlier. They withdrew, not slowly, immediately, because those 4 words triggered something powerful in the spirit realm. It was like a legal announcement of divine protection. And the moment that announcement is made, darkness loses authority in that space. What shocked me most was how simple the words were. No long prayer, no ritual, no ceremony. Just 4 words acknowledging the authority of God over the night. But those 4 words are dangerous to demons for another reason. They remind darkness of something it cannot fight: divine ownership. You see, demons can influence environments, but they cannot override declared spiritual authority. When believers speak those 4 words before sleep, they are doing something powerful. They are declaring that the night does not belong to fear. It does not belong to darkness. It belongs to God. And once that declaration is spoken, darkness must obey spiritual law. It must retreat. That is why we avoided those homes. Not because believers were strong in themselves, but because they activated something stronger than themselves. And once that authority was acknowledged, the entire strategy of darkness collapsed. But here is the truth most believers never hear. Those 4 words are not just a prayer. They are a spiritual signal recognized across the spirit realm. Angels respond, darkness retreats, territory shifts, and the night becomes guarded. But there is something even more shocking I must reveal. Because during my years inside the occult world, we were taught exactly what those 4 words were. And we were trained to watch carefully for believers who still spoke them, because those believers were the hardest targets to attack. And in the next point, I will reveal what those 4 words actually are and why demons react to them instantly. There is something the occult world understands about believers that many believers themselves have forgotten. Power is not always found in long prayers. Sometimes the most dangerous declaration against darkness is short, simple, and spoken with authority. The 4 bedtime words we were trained to watch for were these: Jesus is Lord tonight. Simple, direct, but devastating to the kingdom of darkness. You may hear those words and think they sound ordinary, but in the spirit realm they function like a legal proclamation of territory. And demons understand the meaning of that proclamation instantly. Because when someone declares that Jesus is Lord, they are not simply saying a religious phrase. They are announcing who rules that space. They are declaring ownership, authority, dominion. And when that declaration includes the word tonight, something very specific happens in the spiritual realm. The night itself becomes covered under divine authority. You must understand why that matters. Darkness operates best in unclaimed territory. If a believer never declares authority over their home, their sleep, their night, spiritual forces treat that space as vulnerable. Not possessed, but vulnerable, open, accessible. But the moment a believer whispers Jesus is Lord tonight, the situation changes completely. In the spirit realm, it functions like a command. It tells darkness something very clear. This night does not belong to fear. This house does not belong to darkness. This sleep does not belong to spiritual manipulation. Everything inside this home is under the authority of Jesus Christ. And demons cannot challenge that declaration. Not because believers are powerful on their own, but because the authority behind the name Jesus is absolute. During occult training, we were warned repeatedly about believers who use the name of Jesus with conviction, not casually, not habitually, but with genuine belief, because that name carries spiritual authority that darkness cannot resist. And when it is spoken before sleep, it closes the most common door darkness tries to use, dream access. You see, dreams are one of the easiest places for spiritual influence to appear. Fearful dreams, oppressive dreams, confusing dreams. Those are common methods used by dark spiritual forces. But when someone declares Jesus is Lord tonight, something remarkable happens. The dream environment becomes protected. Instead of darkness influencing dreams, the atmosphere becomes peaceful, guarded, covered. This is why those words caused immediate reaction in the spirit realm during our assignments. Because demons are extremely sensitive to authority declarations. The moment authority is spoken, they lose operational permission. And I witnessed this many times. One particular assignment still stays in my memory. It involved a family with 3 children. Their house was targeted because of repeated prayer gatherings that happened there. Occult networks often target homes where believers gather frequently, because prayer creates spiritual disruption to darkness. So one night we attempted to release fear into the home through the children's dreams. That was the objective. Children are often spiritually sensitive. Fear in children can spread quickly through a family. But that night something happened we did not expect. The mother walked through the house, turning off the lights before bed. She checked the doors, checked the windows. Then she paused at the hallway. And she said something quietly, almost like a habit she practiced every night. Jesus is Lord tonight. 4 words, spoken softly. Effect in the spirit realm was immediate. Every spirit assigned to that house withdrew, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. It was like an invisible command had just been issued, and the territory was no longer accessible. That night, the house became spiritually guarded space, and we were forced to abandon the assignment completely. That was the moment when I began questioning everything I had been involved in, because I realized something profound. Believers were walking around with spiritual authority they did not even realize they possessed, and the enemy depended on that ignorance. Darkness thrives when believers forget their authority, when believers remain silent, when believers assume prayer does not matter. But the moment believers declare truth, everything changes. Those 4 bedtime words are powerful because they accomplish 3 things at once. First, they declare allegiance. They remind the spiritual realm who you belong to. Second, they establish authority. They announce who rules over your home and your night. Third, they seal the environment. They create a spiritual boundary darkness cannot cross. And this is why the kingdom of darkness quietly hopes believers stop saying them. Because if every believer ended the day with that declaration, many night attacks would disappear instantly. But there is one final truth I must reveal. Because those 4 words do something even greater than stopping demonic activity. They activate heavenly protection. And in the final point, I will explain exactly what happens in the spiritual realm the moment those 4 words are spoken before sleep. There is something most believers never see, something the physical world hides, but the spirit realm recognizes instantly. When a believer whispers Jesus is Lord tonight before sleep, the declaration does not disappear into silence. It triggers movement, immediate movement, because the spirit realm responds to authority declarations faster than the natural world responds to sound. During my years inside the occult world, we were trained to observe those reactions carefully. And what I saw repeatedly changed my understanding forever. The moment those words were spoken, 3 things began to happen in the spirit realm. The first thing was territorial shift. Darkness operates through influence, but influence requires access, and access requires open territory. When believers say nothing before sleep, the spiritual environment remains neutral. Neutral territory is where dark spirits operate most easily. But when someone declares Jesus is Lord tonight, that neutrality disappears. The territory becomes claimed. And in the spirit realm, claimed territory belongs to the authority that was declared. That means darkness must leave. not negotiate, not argue. Leave immediately. The moment the declaration is spoken, the spiritual map of that home changes. It becomes territory recognized under the authority of Christ. And darkness cannot occupy territory where divine authority has been announced with faith. That is why demons react so violently to those words, because they recognize a legal boundary they cannot cross. The second thing that happens is spiritual reinforcement. This was something we noticed many times during assignments. After those 4 words were spoken, the atmosphere around the home became heavier, stronger, almost fortified. It was like a shield forming around the environment, not visible to human eyes, unmistakable in the spirit realm. What we were witnessing was the arrival of heavenly guardianship. You must understand something important. Protection in the spiritual realm is not passive, it is active. When believers acknowledge divine authority, heaven responds. Angelic protection becomes active. The home becomes monitored, guarded, and the moment that spiritual reinforcement appears, dark forces cannot approach without encountering resistance. Assignments fail, collapses, fear loses influence. This is why believers who speak authority before sleep often experience something powerful. Peace, deep peace, sleep becomes restful, dreams become calm, and the house feels different, because the atmosphere truly is different. It has been reinforced by divine presence. But the third thing that happens when those 4 words are spoken is the most powerful of all. It is identity confirmation. Darkness constantly tries to convince believers that they are weak, unprotected, powerless. That is one of its greatest strategies. If believers doubt their authority, they rarely use it. But the moment someone declares Jesus is Lord tonight, something happens inside the believer as well. Their identity is reaffirmed. They are reminded that they belong to Christ. They are reminded that their home belongs to Christ. They are reminded that darkness has no ownership there, and that identity declaration carries enormous power, because the spirit realm responds not only to words, but to the authority behind them. And when a believer speaks truth with faith, the authority behind that truth becomes active. That is why demons react instantly, not because the words are magical, but because the authority they declare is real. And I witnessed the proof of that authority during my final assignment before I left the occult world. It was a small house. An elderly woman lived there alone. We were told she prayed often, but we assumed she would be an easy target. After all, she was old, alone, physically weak. Those were the conditions darkness loves to exploit. So the assignment began shortly after midnight. The atmosphere around the house was quiet, calm, vulnerable. Or so we believed. Inside the house, the woman was already in bed. The lights were off. But right before she closed her eyes, she spoke slowly and clearly. Jesus is Lord tonight. Not whispered. Declared. And what happened next shook me to my core. The atmosphere around the house exploded with spiritual resistance. Not gradually, instantly. It was like light had flooded the territory. The spirits assigned to that mission retreated immediately. But something else appeared as well. Presence, authority, protection so strong the assignment could not even continue. And in that moment, something inside me broke. Because I realized something that the occult world had tried to hide from believers for centuries. Believers are not powerless. They are only unaware of their authority. The elderly woman had no idea an occult assignment had been sent against her. She had no idea dark forces were watching her home. She simply spoke 4 words she had probably spoken for years. But those 4 words activated protection stronger than anything the occult world could overcome. That was the night I began walking away from everything I had been part of, because I realized the kingdom of darkness survives on one thing above all else: believers staying silent. But the moment believers begin declaring authority again, darkness loses ground. Homes become protected, families become guarded, and the night itself becomes territory covered under divine authority. Those 4 bedtime words are not complicated, but they are powerful, because they remind the spirit realm of something darkness never wants to hear. Jesus is still Lord, even in the night, especially in the night. Now you understand the truth the occult world hoped you would never discover. 4 simple words can turn your home into territory darkness cannot enter. So tonight, before you sleep, declare it boldly. Jesus is Lord tonight. If this revelation awakened you, comment right now, share this video, and make sure others hear this warning. Many people clicked away too early and missed the truth revealed at the end, but you stayed, and now you know the authority you carry. Darkness fears believers who understand their power. Speak it, declare it, and watch the night surrender to the authority of Christ.